All right. So thank you for joining me. I appreciate you taking the time. Would you like to do an intro?
Sure. I guess I can give an intro and then maybe why I'm running, and then we can jump into the conversation in case people want to stick around for the whole conversation. I'll try to get to the highlights. And first, thank you to you, for Amanda, for setting this up, and for the lead Dems for hopefully watching this. It means a lot to be able to communicate through Zoom in a way. And I always think the best part of any campaign that I've ever been a part of, either volunteering or running for, is the people you meet and the stories that you hear from those. And so I'm sad that I'm not hearing as many kind of in-person, in-depth conversations, and hearing what the problems you're going to go try to solve. But I do like the opportunity to talk to maybe more people more efficiently. And so helping to get the message out and hear from more people has been great. I really believe that you only enter public service out of love. It's too hard to do it for any other reason. And I'm in this race for my daughters. We're having another one in the end of November, hopefully much after general election. For their future and the future of New Hampshire. I believe that we need somebody that knows what the Republicans are going to try to do to education funding in the Senate, and try to defend it. That's going to be especially true next year, as COVID is going to take a bat to our finances. And we can't let Frank Edelblut follow the Nancy DeVoe playbook in New Hampshire any longer. And I'm prepared to really step up to the plate and fight for education. I think we need somebody that knows how important healthcare is. It was a big reason, and some of you might know me from my congressional run a couple of years ago. It was a big reason to get in because the healthcare system that we have in America is broken. And I found that out when my wife had an autoimmune disease, and we were left scrambling. And that was even with health insurance and a job. It was still, it brought us to the brink. We need somebody that understands that those stakes in Concord, and is able to go out and fight for that. I think that there's a lot of good work that we can do, from prescription drugs to Medicaid expansion. There's just so much work to be done in the Senate, and I was really happy to see the omnibus package that include a price cap on insulin pass. I mean, it's an autoimmune disease. It's close to my heart. I want to be able to fight for that. But it's not just for prescription drugs. It's for emerging carcinogens like PFAS. There's not somebody that looks at somebody with childhood cancer and say, I would like to do everything in my power to solve that. But the problem is you got to solve it a lot earlier. So we really have to bring the fight around PFAS and continue the work that so many have done. It's tough to talk about healthcare with also talking about substance misuse, and really talking about community recovery and a culture of recovery. I'm proud to sit on the board for SOS, which is a program that reaches out and tries to lend aid into that. And then we always have to fight for a woman's right to a full range of reproductive services, including safe legal abortion. We have a governor that launched his political career basically as voting to defund Planned Parenthood. And so that can't ever be stopped. And we got to focus on increasing access, to abortion. I think that there's only 4 clinics in all of New Hampshire that allow an unscheduled abortion to take place. When it comes to the environment, we need somebody that's going to fight. And specifically for me, the Great Bay, it's a treasure. I have spent so much time on that body of water from rowing, learned how to row there. It really feeds our entire community in one way or the other. And understanding from nitrogen levels or transmission lines, we really have to have, we have to defend that and the natural beauty that has either kept somebody in New Hampshire or has brought somebody. And so all of my life, I've seen that diversity, education, the environment, healthcare as necessary to create a really prosperous state. And I believe we need somebody in District 21 that is going to make democratic values look like New Hampshire values. And I believe I can do that. And we need somebody that's going to promise to invest really invest in our future, and I can make that promise to you and have it recorded here because I've already made that promise to my daughters. So I'm looking forward to hearing some questions, Amanda, and I'll get off my soapbox a little bit there, but I'm really excited to be in this race.
Awesome. Well, no, you should stay on your soapbox. That's the whole point of this conversation. You said at the beginning that you should only serve, public if for the love of it, which is completely true. Tell me why you love this, and what's your history, what's your background, where did you grow up, tell me your life story.
Sure. That's always, I always forget to tell my life story. So I love, well, you can only enter in politics. It doesn't have to be a love out of politics. It just has to be, I feel like there needs to be a love and a passion behind doing this work. It's not, for the $100 a year. It's not for the plates. It's not for any of those trappings, because it's too hard, and it takes too much time away from family. I think what you have to really grasp is an empathy. I think we lose that too much in politics today, but there needs to be an empathy and a belief that if you can help other people, that you should help other people. If you're in a position to do something, then you should. And it doesn't mean everybody has to run for office, but it could mean donating to a campaign. It could be, calling people that, that you think should join into to vote for somebody. But it all comes down to a passion. And I think I learned that passion. I grew up in Portsmouth. My father was involved in politics. I only knew that as he was a guy that walked in a lot of parades as a kid. And I learned from him that the best time that you could spend was in service of other people. It always reminds me, that time at church where you reach over somebody and show them a sign of peace, you shake hands. There was always this warm feeling that came over me. I think that as humans, we are compassionate, altruistic people that work to solve problems together. And I think that politics, while it becomes it can become very nasty and very polarized, I honestly think that the government is us. We are the government, and it's best when we are talking about actual problems. I'm really excited about the Senate because it extends off the work that I'm doing in the council here in Portsmouth. I believe that really to any piece of legislation, and there's a lot of problems that we need to solve that affect our cities and towns that only can be done on the state level because of anything not specifically enumerated in the Constitution is not allowed to be done by the cities or towns or municipalities. But there's so many problems that exist out there for people in New Hampshire, and I think that any piece of legislation, it usually starts with somebody, with somebody trying to overcome something in New Hampshire. And that's what I would take to Concord, is the belief that everything, any piece of legislation started as somebody had a problem. And those are the things that really excite me is, how can we get prescription drug costs lower? How can we, put PFAS standards in so that people are not, our highest pediatric cancer rate is not the highest in the country. There's so many problems that of course we'd all want to solve, but that requires legislation. And that's the fun part about trying to get to a yes there with competing interests and a whole lot of different priorities. And that's what draws me to it.
Nice. You said council. Do you mean Portsmouth City Council?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm serving my first year on the Portsmouth City Council. It's and in a lot of ways, I hope to continue on the plans of senators that have come before in Portsmouth and serve on both. Kevin Kavanaugh does it, and I think that it's going to give me a unique perspective because the property tax tied to education. If you balance a budget by downshifting, it's not a balanced budget. And I think that there's a lot of, when we talk about affordability in New Hampshire, we have to talk about how do we create, more opportunity for affordable housing for young families to move here. But we also have to talk about how do we keep the generation that's built up New Hampshire, their property taxes do not continue to rise. And anything that is kind of, shifted down is a tax increase that a property taxpayer that might not be able to afford it. So Amanda, I want to thank you for standing firm on the business profits and enterprise tax as defending the property taxpayer that would otherwise be left foot in the bill.
So the New Hampshire Senate, as you mentioned, a whole $100 a year. But on top of that, it's a lot of hours. So how do you expect to balance work and life? Because you could be in Concord Monday through Friday for 12 hours. How do you see that framing the rest of your life?
Yeah, so I would like to stay married. And I think putting a box around that is something that I would like to be able to do. I'm a planner, so and I have a job where I've worked remote. I think a lot of people have found the joys of working remote now. I've worked remotely for a technology company for the better part of 10 years. So I feel like I'll be continuing, if I had won the megabucks, maybe I quit my job, but I'll have to maintain a job. And I think it's important that the Senate is represented by working families that have responsibilities and commitments, both to, a community, but to a family to raise. And I think that at times, the way that New Hampshire is structured with the low pay and time commitments, we tend to have more of an older generation. And I'm just going to I'll balance it by sleeping less and scheduling more. And I feel like I have the energy to be able to do that.
Okay, cool. What do you do for that tech company? What's your job?
Oh, so I manage basically the relationships of New England. Yext, it's a publicly traded company. It's anytime you go and you look up information about either a restaurant or a retail location, a bank, anytime you want driving directions, we organize information so it appears on the internet correctly. We like to say that we bring facts to the internet. There's a whole lot of information out there, and for an example, if you wanted to know does Campbell's soup have gluten-free options? Well, you're likely going to get a lot of maybe blogs that talk about people's favorite options, and you'll come back, okay, they have 4. Well, they actually have like 52. And we organize that information and get it directly to the consumer. And I think in COVID, it's been pretty interesting because there's so much misinformation out there that we started actually providing our services for free to like the state of New Jersey to get answers on anything related to COVID, or for the World Health Organization. So basically, we build a knowledge graph and use what's called natural language processing, which lead Democrats, you can skip over this part if you're not interested, but it basically understands how it understands how people talk and allows computers to interact in a more natural way. So you can ask a question and it can provide an answer, just like how Google can say, who painted the Mona Lisa, and it's going to tell you Leonardo da Vinci. It both understands the question and can deliver an answer based on that. So we think that, we think the internet is going to change over the next, it always changes, but towards having more answers. And that's something that I hope to be able to bring. If not, I'm certainly not going to be designing a state website. But I think, as those issues come up, I'd like to be, joining Senator John Morgan, who has a tech background as well, and push for some more modernization of some of the softwares and systems that we have, because that just makes it easier to do and get, information from government. And that's a big part of, I think, what, maybe our current websites lack. A little
You
bit.
know, yes, the technology for local government is quite frustrating. So I'm all for that. The general court's website is not always the easiest to find something. They have improved it, but what I'd love to see is, and of course it's a constitutional amendment, but to be able to do more remote stuff for emergencies, and more flexibility in what the software, and this is the nitty gritty too, but the software that the actual staff uses, the administrative staff, it's quite rigid. So even just trying to figure out how to improve that. They went through a lot of learning moments when it came to scheduling remote meetings, because the current system only lets you pick rooms and there's no flexibility. And just the way that it's, yeah, there was a lot of frustration at the beginning. So I'm all for that. Anything that would help modernize the system.
Yeah, on your point on remote stuff, I think that in New Hampshire, we're not going to go back to a pre-COVID world. Even when the sickness passed, and I call it sickness because that's what my almost 4-year-old calls it, the sickness. And that's another topic that's kind of crazy, just, how our kids are going to, it's a traumatic experience, and how are they going to be able to come back, even if they don't realize it's a traumatic experience at the time. But when it comes to, remote, either learning or jobs, there's going to be, I believe, and this is, everybody's crystal ball is a little foggy, but we're going to see a lot of people that want to come to New Hampshire that will have more opportunities to work remotely. We're going to have to incorporate those people. And I think what we're learning, at least on the municipal level with remote meetings, I hope we're not going to go all the way back to what it was before. I think from a participation standpoint, allowing, testimony from people that might not be able to make it to Concord, make that drive, they shouldn't be shut out of the system to be able to have a voice. And I think that, it's going to be our job to try to incorporate, the best parts of remote, and there's so many things that are frustrating about it, obviously, but there are some aspects in terms of accessibility that I would really love to see move forward, because the only way we get a government that represents us is to have our voices heard at that government. And I don't think because somebody works 2 jobs and is busting their hump to raise a kid, and they can't make the 45-minute drive to Concord, that their voice is even more valuable than somebody that does have the time and the flexibility, because we need to we need a government that works, for those folks.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm loving the remote stuff. And especially when, in regards to the state house and the house in general, I think it makes me personally a better chair, because I'm able to attend hearings that I would never want to do the hour drive into Concord. I am more productive with the house. I'm able to give more updates to my committee. I think overall it's a better system, and I would, not that we're going to do it very often according to our current leadership, but in case there's ever another state of emergency. And I'd also think that includes snowstorms, because when there's a snowstorm, very rarely does the state house actually cancel session. And house members are not required, but they feel required to stay in a nearby hotel so they could walk to the state house the next day. Again, after taxes, it's $88. And I think if you have to pay for a hotel just to make sure you can make the session on time, it's kind of ridiculous. And the state house puts safety before, like, I don't think they cancel enough, and they should and so if we do more remote meetings, I think it would give all of us, no matter where we are in the state, a better access to, and I'm just talking selfishly as a legislator, but I think it would be wonderful if it snows, or if you have surgery. I had my ranking member in my committee had to be out for a while, and I was not allowed to put him on an iPad next to me so he could still stay part of the hearing. At that time, it was unheard of and a big, huge, apparently no-no. So I'd like to see
Yeah.
some flexibility and have it be a little bit more, realistic for the demands of the job to be able to match. I don't know. So I'm obviously with you on that. I think, especially with a younger group coming in, hopefully that some things will change. It is hard, though, to go in with the gung-ho attitude that I'm going to change the world. This is what I'm going to do, because, of course, the State House is very established in their rules, and sometimes it can be a little frustrating, at least on the House side. The Senate seems to be a little bit different. You guys are all very polite and very sweet to each other. It's not always that way in the House. So,
Well, I think that politeness is, it's probably because there's less of the senators than there are of the House. There's and you have to work with one another to get something passed. But I couldn't agree. I think it's an easier option than having somebody at the State House or a senator actually paid a wage, a living wage to be able to do this full time. I don't see that happening. But I do think that if we are to, if we really want representation, and that's sometimes the disappointment that I have with Republican friends, is that I'm all in for more people having access. I think that our job, the government's us, and we should have access to our government. It seems a pretty, a standard, a standard belief, but sometimes there's pushback against well, more qualified people might run, and maybe they're more Democrats if they're younger. But I'd be happy to have Republicans zoom in as well. I just think it allows constituents to see a part of the process that is government. We're recording this conversation. All politics should happen out in the public. I really dislike the idea of the meetings before the meetings. I feel like if you have the conversation, sometimes you orchestrate it so much that it looks like it's it was rigged, and kind of is if you've had the meetings before that. So I think having the disagreements and having people privy to those is an important part of bringing people along.
agreed. And we do have the meetings before the meetings in the State House. And I always say, when I first watched the House before getting in, it was like everyone it was a ballet. Everybody knew where they needed to be. It was all very smooth and seamless. And, you do have your caucus meetings, and you do have the meetings with your Republican friends who, try to getting a bill passed or whatever. So there are some meetings before the meetings, but yeah, I completely agree that I do feel even those should probably be a little bit more public than they are. So, and it's tough because in the State House, not every room has recording capabilities, and I know they're working towards that, but if you could make any steps towards that, I would be so grateful.
That's it.
And this my next question might be a little bit of an unfair question, but I feel like it needs to be asked. So we all do know you because you ran for the congressional seat that ultimately Chris Pappas got. And so my question would kind of leans to, like, do you feel like, so there's actually two questions. Why, after losing that, do you think then you could do state Senate? I mean, do you feel like people might think, well, you lost this, so maybe he's just trying to do this? And then what did you learn from that campaign that you're going to apply to this campaign?
Sure. Well, I don't think it's an unfair question. I think that it's completely fair, if somebody's thinking that I lost that and now I'm doing this. I think we have to figure out the best ways that we can serve the state of New Hampshire. I really, really enjoyed the campaign. Would have liked to done better. I think Chris is doing an amazing job as our congressional representative, and I spent so much time with him during that I really learned just how much he loves New Hampshire, because he loves the constituents and the constituent service. And it's going to be hard pressed to find a congressional representative that's going to work harder on that. I know that he's helped me and people that I've sent his way with a question, and he just loves doing that. And so I think running for office doesn't qualify me for running for another office at all. But I did learn a lot about the issues that this district faces. This is not the first office that I've ran for. I serve on the city council because I saw my town being pulled apart, and trying to bridge some of those divides was really important to me. And I thought I had a voice, and specifically with what we went through in healthcare, to be able to add to the congressional race. And I'm happy that my voice was there, talking about things like Medicare for all. But the voters chose wisely, and there's still a lot of issues happening on the state level. Prescription drugs, Medicare expansion or Medicaid expansion, Medicare reimbursements on the state level. And what I've seen on the city level is just the effects of downshifting, and the budget that we're going to be fighting for in the next 2 years is going to be affected by COVID quite drastically. So while I wouldn't say that, certainly doesn't qualify me for doing that, I do believe my life experience of understanding the political makeup of the Senate. I can't say that I have those relationships. I know, and I've met some of those people, and some of the senators, and have good relationships with some, but that's not going to be enough. I think it's more the judgment that I would bring to that, and the values that I have, and those values are service. So I think it's a fair question, and I'd be happy. I'm happy to answer it. There's probably some other tougher questions that you should probably ask too. But it's not trying to. It's certainly. It's not something that I intended to do. And I honestly, if Stephanie had run for it, I was going to support her. And when she decided not to, and that's Stephanie Shaheen. I don't know if she's as well known in Lee as she is in Portsmouth and Oyster River. But when she asked me to do it, I thought about how can I do this, and so it wasn't something that I was plotting to do. You could notice that I got in on the last day of the filing, and I hadn't my congressional run. I wasn't orchestrating this because it's a really hard job, but I feel like I had to step up to do it, when others that I thought might be great candidates decided not to.
Cool, good to know. So I think I only have 2 questions, and none of them are really that hard. But how would you compare or contrast yourself compared to Senator Fuller Clark, or even your competitor in this race, Rebecca?
Yeah, well, so I appreciate the question on Rebecca. I'm going to leave that to the voters of Lee to do the homework on that. I have learned from primaries that we all want to be, we get to decide who's going to represent us, and the more the time that I spend talking about my opponent, is one, takes away from time that I can talk about myself, and all politicians. But 2, primaries are great in a lot of ways, but if they turn to be a comparative thing between candidates, I just don't think New Hampshire voters or Lee voters want that. I'm going to talk about the issues that I care about, and I learned that in primary. So I'll take that. What differs for me from the senator or current senator is I'm not a woman. I would say this seat has been held by Jeannie, by Katie, by Iris, by Mandy, and by Martha Fuller Clark. I'm really happy to. I launched and it's a weird thing to say, but a leadership committee of Deaglan, or Women for Deaglan, and I'm lucky to have the support of Terry Norelli and Katie Wheeler and Margie Smith, Mandy Merrill. I count on that, and Stephanie Shaheen. I count on that support as their belief in me that I'm bringing the values to this seat in this district that it's important. But to think that I'm going to replace Martha Fuller Clark, who I believe is the lioness of the Senate, is no, I'm not. It's not. It's neither I don't feel bad about saying neither my opponent or I are going to jump into those shoes. But and where we differ is, I think I look at things maybe through more of a technology lens, but she's going to be irreplaceable, but she's not going anywhere. She's just retiring from politics, and she's still going to help the state in a lot of ways. And I'm going to look to her for advice moving forward. And I think it's really important that the progressive legacy that that she's built her career on in politics is carried forward, and I believe that I am the candidate to be able to do that.
Awesome. So how can the Lee Dems help you?
Well, I would say first and foremost, I would love to hear from the Lee Dems individually. Deaglan at Vote McEachern is, I read that email and answer all of those emails. So if there are questions and I should, if you wouldn't mind, nobody's going to know how to pronounce either my first or last name on that. So when you send that out, please send it out with with my email address to address any questions. If you want to support my campaign, we've hired a campaign manager, Nick Paul. He managed Senator Morgan's campaign, successful campaign the last time, and I would love to connect you to him in terms of volunteer efforts. And then, it seems strange asking in a pandemic for money, but it's part of the it's important, and I think that in our district especially. There's a responsibility of whoever has the seat to be able to raise money, not just to win this seat, but the money to go help a Jen Alfred-Teaster in Senate District 8 or a Sue Ford in Senate District 1 to make sure that we're able to support a supermajority in the Senate to be able to make sure we can, if Kristen Noon is still there, to overcome some of those vetoes. One, I'd just like to hear from you. Two, if you're impressed, would love to have your support and to figure out how we can put you to work. And three, would love your hard-earned dollars. I promise to make them as effective as possible in getting our message out.
Awesome. And I guess the last thing is there anything that you haven't said that you want to say? Is there any questions I didn't ask that I should have asked? This is your chance to just kind of speak.
I just it's really important. I guess the only point that I haven't touched on is just how important you are, and how important everybody is that's watching this video. I think that service is, if I'm a state senator in Senate District 21, my job is to take your enthusiasm and your belief that this government is something that you can change and mold into a better, more representative democracy. And I just thank you so much for, maybe you watch this on double speed, maybe you are just listening to it while you're gardening and you're not watching me. All of that is fine. That you are engaged in your government is not just, it's the New Hampshire way. It should be, the way of our country. And I just want to thank you so much for tuning in, because it makes it a lot of fun to hopefully represent people that are so engaged in this process and that believe that they are the government. And I would love to help represent you in Concord.
That's great. Well, thank you very much for running and for doing this interview. I appreciate it. And when I send this out, it will be with your contact info and website and all of that fun stuff. So, of course, if anybody wants to get a hold of you, they'll know how.
All right. Well, do you have any plans for the fourth? Do I see a bunch of road race medals back there? Like that's are those,
Uh, yeah,
those
yeah, I do a lot of road races.
and I saw that Naomi had oh, well, she's not, it's not Rockingham County, but she has
No, I'm bummed.
a virtual road race that's coming up. So for me, running is always a desire to start walking. I'm a little too tall, and my back and knees are a little too weak
Yours.
to be able to do that. But I really, that's pretty cool, and I need to have some of my. This is a picture of the boat race that I was in up there when we won in England.
Oh.
It was cool, but not not a medal there, but
Hey,
hopefully,
you still have something to hang on your wall. It's fine.
yeah. It's just not a
Oh,
medal.
and I forgot to ask, you had a puppy behind you. Tell me a little bit about, I don't know
Oh, yeah,
where
Adam.
he or she
So
went.
his name is Blue. We got him
Thank you.
2 weeks before we got married because we saw him in a shelter. Like it was like a Books on Wheels. Nobody remembers what Books on Wheels were, but it was like it would drive around with like a library and you'd look in and see a book and get to read it. And we just saw him 2 weeks before we got married, and we're like, should we take him on a walk? And I went to my wife, do you want a dog right now? Because it's not like we're going to put him back in the van. And he's great with kids, and he's not so great to sleep with. Like I wake up with his butt on the face literally all the time. And but he's he's a great dog, and I think rescue dogs are some of the best. I think they know just how lucky we all are to have him in our life. And he has, if you see him up close, he has blue eyes, which is unusual for a
Oh.
black lab. So he's some mix of something, but yeah, I'll put a plug in for always rescue a dog if you can. There's a lot of dogs that need homes, and
Mhm.
you won't be disappointed because they certainly won't be.
I love that. That makes me happy. Awesome. Well, thank you again. I am going to end this, and then and if anybody wants to reach out, they'll have your contact info.
Great. Thank you so much, Amanda. It was a lot of fun. I really do appreciate
Thanks.
it.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Bye.